afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mellissa Thomas of Florida National News, of course, the co-host of Let's Clarify with the one and only Angel Perry. On the screen at my right. How's it going, Angel?
It's going good. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. Always a pleasure to break things down with you. So obviously, what a weekend. So we wanted to make sure to clarify, break down all the way down kind of the root of what we're seeing in terms of these traffic stops kind of escalating beyond control. In some cases, kind of unnecessarily, but we wanted to, of course, you guys know what Let's Clarify, we kind of blow past the emotionality of any headline and past the talking points to get to the root of things. And of course, this first part, guys, we want to kind of just lay out the stories themselves. So, I mean, we'll start with, of course, Daunte Wright, because that's still going on right now. Like there's still reverberations going on with that. There's, last night was the third night of protests with the death of Daunte Wright. Of course, if you've been following the news, Officer Potter, who was the one who shot Daunte Wright, she has now been charged with manslaughter. She resigned eventually, but yeah, she has now officially been charged as of today. So there you go. That's what's been going on there. But we wanted to lay that out. Obviously, this was a traffic stop due to an expired license plate, and then in Minnesota and in several other states as well. But in Minnesota specifically, they said you can't have anything hanging from your rearview mirror. So that was another point of contention. Daunte Wright had something hanging from his rearview mirror in that case. Angel, we're gonna have to figure out how you confuse a taser with a gun on that part.
Well, I wanted to just highlight a couple of the specifics, though. So
yeah,
everybody's forgetting COVID.
That part.
Daunte Wright actually did pay to renew the plates.
Mm-hmm.
There was no way to actually get the physical ones.
Mm-hmm.
Police officers do have the ability to check and make sure that someone has paid whatever, fees and renewals. So once they physically saw the plate was expired and then checked that it was actually paid for, it's just there was no way to actually get a physical replacement, then they proceeded to pull him over for the air freshener. Okay.
There's that.
So the physical aspects of a weapon. I've grown up with weapons all my life since girl. A handgun is very heavily weighted because the chamber in itself is used to ignite with gunpowder and a hammer inside the weapon, whether it's a revolver or semi-auto, in order to expel the bullet to wherever you're aiming at. So even if you have a partial steel and polymer or all steel or whatever metal your weapon is made out of, the taser is considerably lighter because it does not have to expel an actual bullet out of the chamber. It's an electronic device, not unfamiliar like your cell phone. So like a heavy cell phone. If you hold a cell phone, one of the large ones that you need to see better on, and a handgun, even if it's they have a sport version to handguns that some women may carry, the weapon is always going to be way heavier than the taser. So taser will feel very similar to a toy gun or BB gun even. But even a BB gun is going to be slightly heavier than a taser. So in some precincts, they always recommend that whatever your primary hand is, whether if you're left-handed or right-handed, that your sidearm is with your primary hand. Yeah, so if the taser was where her secondary arm, like if she's right-handed and taser was on this side of her, there's no confusion what your primary is. And then there's the weight of each object.
Right.
My personal opinion, this was intentional. I've been around weapons all my life. There is no way I'm going to mistake the real thing for something that feels like a toy. And you yelling taser, 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 just for camera's sake, that's my opinion. Somebody that's around weapons all the time, I'm sorry. How many years on the force or whatever?
26. 26.
Unless she was just lazy and never was at a gun range, but I'm pretty sure you got to renew your skills or something. Yeah. All right. Well, there's that.
There's that.
So one of the other stories we wanted to bring up today is Second Lieutenant Caron Nazario.
Yeah.
Was pulled over December 5th of last year. It was Officer Joe Gutierrez and Daniel Crocker pulled him over for tinted windows. Now, this gentleman who's active duty, so I said second lieutenant, just bought the vehicle. Just bought it. Okay? And usually you got a temp tag when you buy a vehicle, whether it's a smaller, car sales place or off of somebody, not realizing that the temp tag was very hard to see, so it looked like he was driving around without a tag at all, which fair. You get pulled over for that. Where they got upset and took it personal is when they initially tried to pull him over. It took about 1 minute, 20 seconds from the time the first light went on for him to get to the gas station. They talk about that you didn't pull over fast enough. Wait, what? He explains very calmly that, sir, for your safety and mine, I wanted to be in a lit area. Now, as a woman, you're allowed to do that.
Right.
Man, like, there's no officer that's going to be insulted that you went to a lit area, because what if that cop isn't a cop? We have that too.
Right.
You need to be able to see that this person is a legitimate officer of the law.
Right.
Okay? So at the point that he's nervous, because one, they never say what he's getting pulled over for.
Right.
Policy in most precincts all around the country, not just some mysteriously that one and some don't, is that it's stated what you're being pulled over for. You're being detained because da-da-da-da-da. Real simple.
Right.
Why would you not want to just say what the problem was? Because technically, if they had just stated, oh, the windows were tinted, we didn't see the tag. The thing was, they did see the tag once everything was stopped and it was under, the gas station lighting, everything was clear.
Yeah.
So then they did what they did, and then all the way at the end, they're like, well, you shouldn't report this because, we don't want you to ruin your career. Really? His career? You're the one doing extra stuff?
His career would have been fine. His career would have been fine.
You're doing stuff nobody told you to do. It's not policy. It's not procedure. Like, why are you pepper spraying a lieutenant of the military? Like, what?
And did one of them say they were a veteran?
And, yeah, one of them did scream out, well, I'm a veteran. What? Were you honorably discharged? Because now I'm questioning. Were you kicked out? Like, what happened there? Now you're bragging about it.
Precisely.
You got fired.
Yes, that for those who haven't heard that update, yes, Gutierrez has been fired.
It's fired. and Daniel Crocker is on administrative leave pending
Mhm.
additional investigation. That's one story. Then we have Officer Jarrett out of New Mexico back in February off of I-10. He was pulling over, similar to the Lieutenant Caron Nazario's case. He was pulling over a truck that the windows were too dark tinted, like you couldn't see inside. Um, this officer, because it was on the highway and during the day, came up towards the passenger side of the truck
Mhm.
and repeatedly had to ask them to lower the window. It was a man and woman on the inside. It was, what's his name? I have it here. Omar
Cueva. Cueva.
Cueva, right? Omar Cueva, who apparently was a really terrible person. Um, the officer Jarrett had realized that he did have a sidearm and asked him to, let me hold on to the sidearm and come back to the cruiser so I can, run all your paperwork and your ID and stuff, and then you can be on your way. When Omar gets out of the vehicle, he had a long gun behind the driver's seat, and the truck is pretty high up, so Officer Jarrett's view was obstructed by the truck. And by the time they both met at the tailgate of the vehicle, Omar Cueva just laid into him with the long rifle, and Officer Jarrett did not make it. Um, that was the most horrible, horrible, horrible thing. And that is a trauma on itself. When an officer's end of watch is violent in any capacity, whether it's domestic abuse call or it's supposed to be something
Right.
simple and they don't make it home, all the precincts share that information, whether or not the public is aware of it or not. And that has its own traumas on itself, and a lot of times officers have call after call. Some are violent, and then they got to answer the next call, and it may be about kittens in a tree, but then, they're supposed to pretend not to have all these emotions when they were just in the middle of something. So there's a lot to unpack with all of these scenarios that
Absolutely.
it's not being addressed.
Yes. And on that note, we gonna take a brief commercial break and we gonna address it on the other side of the break, guys. So stay tuned. This break will be very quick.
Mercury agents everywhere are saving people hundreds and are also there to help save the day.
That was fast.
You covered.
Thanks, agents.
Watch out!
That's my car!
Don't worry. We're here to help.
For savings and service above the rest, you can count on Mercury. We're on a mission to save you money.
All right, guys, we are back with Let's Clarify. So yeah, let's dig in a little bit deeper into this. We got into it on the first side of the break, but just that sort of psychological toll that traffic stops like these take on other officers that may not necessarily be involved in those stops.
So we have a lot of factors that can go into a bad shooting. That the media, obviously, they're all about sensationalism and what sounds good and, political views. I'm not even about that. I have family and friends that are police officers, whether retired or active duty. And, the truth of the matter is, on paper, they have these health programs for the officers, and it's really not there, because from leadership on down, they get picked on if they're struggling with their debt. Some precincts may be close knit enough where they encourage, have that talk, make sure you see a doctor, make sure you get time off. Are you okay? Some precincts have that umbrella and that protection to make sure that the staff is healthy, but by and large, officers are left hang out to dry. Okay, that is not. They are human. They are humans first before they swear in, before they have the training, before they put the badge on. And a lot of the cities and policies of local government can just be very neglectful. Now, you also add into that mix, what people aren't talking about is that that wall of silence.
Right.
This is practiced since beginning of whenever. And I'm just going to set an example. This is a little bit older case, but this happens every day. When a good officer wants to report misconduct, that officer goes into what's called a rat pool. They're considered a rat. Okay? So their life as an officer from that point on becomes unbearable. Can you imagine walking in a building where you have, from a small precinct, which may have 10 officers, to a large precinct that may have a few hundred officers, depending on the city, that everybody whispers, oh, so-and-so ratted out. So I have an example. This is a little bit older case. I have a police officer from Buffalo, New York, Caron Nazario. She was, a veteran with the department when she stopped a fellow officer from brutalizing a handcuffed suspect. This was November 1st in 2006. You can Google it. Google's free. Again, her name is Caron Nazario. She then was fired from her job. Fired for stopping a fellow officer from killing a handcuffed suspect. Gregory Kowalski began choking the handcuffed assailant. They were answering a call, a domestic violence call.
Right.
The suspect pretty much, was uneventful. He was going away peacefully. It was a routine for him, whatever the story was there. The guy, was handcuffed already. All the officer had to do was stick him in the patrol car, take him down to the precinct, but that's not what happened. He decided to choke him. 2 hands. Like, why?
Precisely.
The officer that was enraged punched Caron Nazario in the face. Punched a woman in the face. Now, unpack that for a second. You have an assailant that is charged with domestic abuse. The arresting officer was choking out this person. And then because she decided that this wasn't right, we're supposed to uphold the law, he punches her in the face.
Right.
And then on top of that, for her troubles, then she's fired. The reason why I brought this story up is the state of New York just awarded her all of her back pay from then. I think last year is when they settled on it, and her pension. So what people aren't realizing is, I sign up to be a police officer. I'm going to be my neighborhood's hero. I'm going to be my city's hero. I'm going to protect and serve. My community needs me. They need good officers, and you're a good person. If you say something, you could be forced out by abuse by that same precinct because they rather not see what's happening,
Right.
or get fired. So you have a combination of mental health being neglected, And not to mention being underpaid. So I'm going to bring that up because, you know, I'm a labor
Yes.
leader. I'm all about being paid correctly. So you got underpaid. I'm out risking my life to protect the community. So now I can barely feed my family. And then on top of that, if I'm a good person, I, you know, believe in doing the right thing, I could get fired for doing the right thing. It's like an impossible position for good officers. But not only that, then you're leaving fertile ground for murderers and rapists. Because don't forget, if there's a bad cop, they get to stay bad because everybody's like picking on the good cop for saying something. What are we doing?
Precisely.
What are we doing? We're breeding them. We're breeding bad cops. And I say we because as citizens, if you live in any of your communities and you're not taking responsibility of who you are voting for, all of it's your fault. It's all of our faults. We all bear the responsibility when a bad cop stays on the books. It's not just the police chief. It's not just the person's individual. In the community at large, the lack of involvement, the lack of asking, you know, what is being done. You know, we had an officer here in Florida that had so many complaints about him. And, you know, it wasn't until there was community involvement, then corrections were made, you know. So, I mean, even in our own backyard, what I'm speaking about is nationwide. It's nationwide. We need to protect our good officers. They do not deserve to be in an environment where they're not being helped, paid well. And if there's something bad happening, why are we punishing the good ones? That's a problem.
No accountability.
That's a problem. Why are we letting murderers and rapists run around with a badge? Like, why is that even okay? And then the lady that mistaken her taser, her weapon for a taser, that police chief quit? Because now it's two.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Now there's 2 incidents. Now you have Chauvin that kneeled on George Floyd, and everybody attested that there's nothing in the policy that says you're supposed to kneel on anybody. And then you have this lady, how many years on the force, so confused about her taser, so confused. There's no confusion. I'm sorry,
Absolutely.
to me, that's intentional. If you've been around weapons all your life, the first thing in your mind is like, what? What? Like,
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Pick it up. But I'm glad that chief police quit, because now you got 2 people that should never, ever, ever had a badge on. Like, what? Like, yeah, no. You hired them. You hired both of them. There you go. Bye.
Precisely.
Bye.
And I mean, my mind went to, at first I was like, okay, I'm someone who's a layperson, don't know the difference between a taser and a gun in terms of texture. So I'm glad you broke that down for the audience. But once I heard that she was on the force for 26 years, that's different. You know where your stuff is, because everybody has a routine. And when you're wearing a uniform, you know how you stole your stuff. You know exactly how to reach for what item. So I was like, no, that's not gonna fly. And then of course, I think it was the police chief that spoke during that press conference saying he heard the distress in her voice, you know, on the recording, because of course at the end she said, "Oh, blank, I shot him." I was just like,
Yeah. Oh,
all it
Blake,
takes
I
is one
shot
bullet.
him. Like, oh, I got a badge of honor. I just, you know.
Precisely. So, you know, to the point about the mental aspect of things, because the other thing too is not only discussing the trauma side of it, but also the training. Because in the Lieutenant Nazario situation, when they pulled him over and he kept asking what is going on, because of course they were mad that he didn't pull over initially. He went to the lit gas station.
Seconds. Ooh.
So he's asking what's going on. They're demanding he gets out of the car. One of them says, I gave you an order, obey it. Pause for a second. Pause for a second. As a citizen, you come out demanding I get out the car. You sound furious when you're demanding that I get out the car, which to me sounds combative. I'm going to fear for my life, especially if you're not telling me why you want me to get out the car. That in my opinion speaks to training. Like I gave you an order, obey it. That sounds like a parent talking to a child. You can't be a grown man talking to another grown man, one uniform to another, by the way. It's not like these are two, regular private citizens. This is a police officer and an active duty military service person. Right. You can't be like, I'm giving you an order, obey it. Like, that's not going to fly. You have to explain what's going on. So, to your point, I think both sides have to be weighed there, both addressing the trauma and the training. Well, normally, guys, we stick in a commercial break, but yeah, we just gonna keep the conversation going. Go ahead.
No, I will have to dispute throwing in training. Training is excellent. It has improved in the last 15 years, period. If you ever see the programs that officers have to go through, it's equivalent to a 2-year associate's degree. There are a lot of precincts that have even taken it further than that. You're talking about the other factors when you have personal traumas that are not being addressed, and then you have the fertile ground of a good officer cannot report a bad officer. So when that first bad thing happens with a bad apple, it spoils the bunch in a sense, because people are seeing, oh, wait a minute, he, was too rough with this little kid, or, he's following his girlfriend around and running her place. There's all these little factors that bad cops will do to test how far they can get with bad behavior. That officer that pulled off Second Lieutenant Caron Nazario, that wasn't the first time he did that. People get emboldened when they build up a habit and have a history. And that's the other thing that is not being addressed in the media at all, because they're not interested in it. I care about the officers, the good ones. I care about the communities. So I'm going to lay it flat. The problems are, when you have a bad officer, they start with little stuff, like whether or not they steal out of somebody's wallet when they're doing an arrest. That can happen because we don't know what's in evidence until, it gets in files. Or, maybe at home they're beating their kids and people are pretending that it's not happening. There's all these factors with bad cops. And we are all responsible for those things. And we have to make it safe for good cops to actually be good cops. That is the problem. We're not addressing mental health, and we're not protecting our officers, and then we're not paying them enough. I'm going to say that a million times. So there's all these things, and there's definitely solutions to them. But the real story needs to be presented out to the general public.
Absolutely. So now we can fit in the commercial break and then get into the solutions. So stay tuned, guys. This is that super quick, wet your tongue commercial break. All right, we'll be right back.
At Taco John's, you can expect one thing: so good. As in quality ingredients used in tacos and burritos made just for you. Every single bite.
So good.
Expect nothing less at Taco John's.
And we are back, literally about 10 seconds. That commercial super quick. But yeah, let's, in terms of getting into the solutions, obviously you did mention one of them earlier, which is stay on top of the locally elected officials, stay on top of your mayor, stay on top of the police chief. If there's a way to the sheriff too.
The police chief is appointed by the mayor. The sheriff is who is elected by.
That's the elected one.
Yes, the citizens. But you have more than that. So if you take your zip code in Google and put in who are my elected officials, you can find out what officers are actually have their own record. They're not getting arrested, obviously, but citizens can complain, which a lot of times it does if it's somebody that's really, pretty bad enough. Oh, this officer keeps following me home, because on his route, he's got somebody picked out, because that happens sometimes. And we're talking about small samples. I don't want anybody to think that somehow I'm anti-cop, because that is furthest from the truth. I'm talking about the small samples of bad cops and what can happen, the little incremental bad things that happen, and then they become bigger things. So as a citizen, you should be registered to vote. That is the absolute. That's where your responsibility starts. Your mayor, your commissioners, the commissioners oversee particular areas. Your sheriff's office, which is also an elected official that works together with the police department. The police department is what answers to the mayor. So knowing who all these people are will allow you to be aware of what their policies are. Ask them, well, what is the police policy on this in particular? Don't just take it for granted that, well, I don't understand why this particular officer keeps following me home. That's stalking. That's stalking.
Precisely.
Nobody should be following you home every day. That's a little scary. Or I used to date this lady, and she keeps showing up at my house, or whatever the story is. These little incremental, seemingly like nothing. We all have a responsibility to not only elect people that are for us, but if something was not to be right, then say something about it. Hey, every time I go to the grocery store, this particular officer, seems to be sitting and pulling over kids. He's not filing reports about it. He's just pulling over kids. Or, whatever the story is, you should be in communication with your sheriff's office, with the chief of police, with the mayor's office, with your commissioner's office. All of these things, us as citizens are absolutely responsible for. Nothing gets fixed if we're quiet about it. A quiet baby bird does not get fed. Mama bird is only going to answer to the loud squawks in the nest. If you're in the corner quiet, you get what you get. And usually that's nothing.
Right. And this method here is perhaps the more internal alternative to protesting. That's still an option, but I think when you start at that local level to hold your folks accountable and grow your numbers that way, like show up at the city council meetings and put pressure on them that way, I think there's a bit less of a, for lack of a better term, it's less messy. Because of course you have, kind of like last night where it was the third night of protests in terms of Daunte Wright's killing, you have folks that are out beyond, they have to set a curfew. And then once the curfew is in place and they tell you to evacuate and you don't, that it's fair game for them at that point, because then they do the CYN announcement like, hey, it is beyond the curfew. We have told you X amount of times to evacuate. This is now an unlawful assembly. Now there's no, your cover of protection is gone at that point, because now you're on the illegal side. You're on the other side of the law. So in my opinion, a better way to bring forth accountability.
So protest should be the last resort, because you weren't able to accomplish the conversation that you needed to have between the community and your elected leaders. I challenge all of these people that are rioting. I'm not talking about protesting. I'm talking about rioting. How many of them are registered to vote? How many of them even know who their city commissioner is? How many of them ever even been to a city council meeting? How many? So you're outraged about what happened, but you're contributing to the results of what's happening because you're not even involved. it's easy to burn down a building. It doesn't take very much, some gasoline and a cocktail bomb, and there you go. But it actually takes vested time to actually register to vote. Who's the mayor? Who's the commissioner? Who's the police chief? Who is the sheriff? Like, where is the consistent accountability between the citizens and elected officials? Those cities that have people that are well involved, are Orlando being one of them, it's a different conversation. I'm not saying not to protest. That is our right. But the protest should be, I did everything else and they're still not listening.
Precisely. That's it, y'all. Google is free. Use it. Use it.
Google, use your zip code. Zip code, who are my elected officials? Start there. Be registered to vote. Your power comes in actually being involved, interacting with elected officials. If you're not willing to do the bare minimum, and to me, knowing who those people are and saying hello with your email, peeking in. A lot of city council meetings are on video now just because of COVID.
Right.
Have the TV saved on your browser. Peek in once in a while. Check the schedule of the city council meeting is. A lot of the meetings have agendas. Like
Right.
here in Orlando, we have Orange TV by our
Yeah.
Mayor Demings.
Orange County, yeah.
And they give like where you can text and have updates and you can keep up with TV shows, but you can't keep up with your city council meetings. Like what are we complaining about, people? Why aren't we taking care of our good officers? What are we complaining about?
That part, y'all. That part. So make sure you reach out to your folks, because I mean, a lot of the other thing to consider too, in terms of being present for the meetings, is we know people work, you know what I'm saying? So it might be happening during the daytime, during the day hours when you're at your job. I don't know. Write your folks. If you can't be present for the meetings, still contact them, call them, email them, whatever that is, set up an appointment, carve aside the time at the job to be able to do it. You would have to do it for, your child's parent-teacher conference or something like that. You know what I mean? Treat it as an important appointment. You can
have a lunch date, but you can't check in and see what the city council's doing? Come on.
There you go. Yeah. So on that note, we set you guys free to be awesome and cause good trouble. Hold your folks accountable. Hold your folks accountable. And of course, we thank you guys for tuning in to Let's Clarify. As always, if you haven't done it yet, be sure to like, share, subscribe, follow, all of those awesome things. You'll find us at Florida National News on Facebook. This is on FNN News TV specifically, if you want to tune in on the show on Facebook. If you want to tune in on YouTube, you'll find us there at Florida National News. Of course, be sure to hit the subscribe and the bell icon so you get all the notifications for all of our shows. And you will find us on Instagram as well at Florida National News. We like to keep it simple. That way you can find us more easily. And if you want to drop a question to Angel on Instagram, you can find her there at A4Amazing. That way she'll chop it up with you. And by the way, guys, we love to chop it up with you in the comments on Facebook and YouTube as well. So whatever thoughts you have on today's topic or any of the other previous episodes, be sure to leave your comments. We love to have you join the conversation, chop it up with you, clarify some more things with you. But in the meantime, thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, continue to be careful. COVID-19 is still out here. Johnson & Johnson is now on pause.
That part.
Continue to
doctor.
Yes, consult with your physician if you have one. If you don't, go to ER, something. Do your research. But continue to be careful, mask up, practice your social distancing. Stay safe, guys. Until next Wednesday. Take care.